Okay, imagine this scenario for a second.
Yeah.
You've been paying something off, like really diligently for years and years. Maybe it's your house, maybe a car loan, or maybe like millions of Americans. It's student loan debt. You've made sacrifices, you've budgeted like crazy, and you can finally see that finish line, right? That moment, you're free from the debt. It's getting closer.
You can almost taste it.
Exactly. Maybe just a few months away from this huge milestone you've planned your whole life around. And then, boom, just like that. No warning, the finish line gets moved. They just tell you, keep running.
Wow.
That's the kind of gut-wrenching feeling that millions of Americans are experiencing right now. People who put their faith and, frankly, their financial futures into something called the Income-Based Repayment Plan, or IBR.
Right.
What they thought was a clear contract, a definite promise of hope, of eventual relief. Well, now it just feels broken, undeniably broken. So today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that. How did this thing that was supposed to be a beacon of hope turn into, well, what feels like a profound betrayal for so many?
And it's absolutely crucial we understand the scale here. This isn't some small niche issue affecting just a few people.
Not at all.
We're talking about a system with over 43 million borrowers, collectively holding, get this, over $1.6 trillion in student debt.
It's staggering.
It really is. And within that massive system, IBR wasn't just, another repayment option. It was fundamental, a pillar.
A stabilizing force, our sources call it.
Exactly. A critical stabilizing force for millions. It acted as this vital financial pressure valve. Without it, countless people would have faced default, financial ruin.
Just crushed by the weight of it.
Completely. For what, over 15 years now? It genuinely shapes people's lives, their financial paths, their choices, allows them to take jobs, start families, contribute, all without that constant dread of unmanageable debt hanging over them.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to really unpack what happened with this IBR forgiveness. Why was this, let's face it, deeply controversial decision made? We want to get into the heated debate it sparked, and really, what does it all mean for the future of student debt in America? And maybe most importantly, what does it mean for you? Whether you're paying off loans now, maybe thinking about college, or just, concerned about how these big systems work.
That's right. We need to look at the complex interplay here. You've got the policy itself, how it was designed, but then also the often unforeseen consequences.
Right.
Then there's the huge personal impact this decision has had on people, families, who literally built their lives around this government promise.
A promise they relied on.
Absolutely. And the bigger picture, too, what does this do to trust? Trust in government systems when these long-standing agreements are just suddenly and kind of quietly changed.
Yeah, quietly is the word.
We need to look beyond just the headlines, dig into the mechanics, the human stories, and the weaknesses in the system that this whole crisis has really exposed.
Okay, so to really understand the weight of what's happening now, we need to rewind the clock a bit. Almost 2 decades, actually. What was the student loan situation even like before IBR came along in 2007?
Oh, it was. Rigid is putting it mildly. It was almost brutally simple in a bad way.
How so?
Basically, if you took out a federal loan, you were pretty much put on a standard 10-year repayment plan. That was it.
One size fits all.
Exactly. Your payments were calculated based purely on how much you borrowed, not what you earned or if you could realistically afford it.
So if you graduated with a lot of debt,
yeah,
but went into, say, teaching,
you were in trouble. The system had almost zero flexibility. Let's take that example our sources used. A teacher in a rural town may be making $35,000 a year, but they've got $80,000 in debt.
Okay.
Under that old system, their monthly payment could easily be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Just impossible for someone living paycheck to paycheck, maybe trying to support a family.
It wasn't just difficult. The source said it was destructive.
Precisely. Destructive. It led to massive numbers of defaults, wrecked credit scores. It trapped people in these cycles of financial stress. They couldn't buy homes, couldn't start businesses. The system, honestly, often ended up hurting the very people who needed that leg up the most.
And that's the context. That's the problem that Income-Based Repayment, IBR, was designed to fix back in 2007, part of the College Cost Reduction and Access Act.
Correct.
And what's really striking, especially looking back from today's polarized world, is that this wasn't initially some big partisan fight, was it?
No, not at all. And that's a crucial point that gets lost sometimes. It was genuinely a bipartisan effort.
Both sides saw this ballooning student debt crisis, as the source puts it.
They did. They recognized the system was broken, that the rigidity was causing real harm, and IBR, well, it truly offered something revolutionary. You used the word earlier, hope.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
It truly offered something revolutionary, hope. What made it so different?
It was the connection to income. That was the core innovation. Instead of basing payments just on your loan amount, IBR linked them directly to what you could actually afford to pay based on your income.
How did that work practically?
Eligible borrowers could cap their monthly payments at a set percentage of their discretionary income. And that term, discretionary income, is important. It's not just a slice of your total pay.
Right, it's calculated somehow.
Yeah, generally it's your adjusted gross income, your AGI, minus 150% of the federal poverty line for your family size. So it's supposed to represent what you have left after covering basic living costs.
That's a huge shift from just a fixed payment.
Seismic. Initially, the cap was 15% of that discretionary income. For many people, that was a massive reduction in their monthly burden. But the real game changer, the light at the end of the tunnel, was the promise of loan forgiveness.
After how long?
After 25 years of making those qualifying income-based payments, for the first time, millions of borrowers saw a definite end date for their student debt.
That must have been huge psychologically.
Immense. It meant you could actually plan long-term. You could take that teaching job or work for a nonprofit or go into social work, these vital, often lower-paying fields without the constant terror of defaulting or facing financial ruin.
So IBR wasn't just a one-and-done thing in 2007. It evolved, right? The Obama administration built on it.
They did, significantly. They introduced payee, pay-as-you-earn, in 2010, and then revised pay-as-you-earn in 2015. These weren't just small adjustments, they were major expansions of the concept.
Making it better for borrowers.
Generally, yes. PYE, which was for newer borrowers at the time, dropped the payment cap even lower, down to 10% of discretionary income. And importantly, it shortened the forgiveness timeline to 20 years instead of 25.
Okay, that's a big difference.
Then Repay came along in 2015 and opened it up even more. It extended eligibility to pretty much all federal student loan borrowers, kept that 10% payment cap for most, and applied it to both undergraduate and graduate loans.
Did they do anything about the interest problem? Like balances growing even while people paid?
Yes, that was another key improvement in these later plans. Many included provisions to help with unpaid interest. Sometimes the government would subsidize a portion of it, or they'd prevent it from capitalizing, meaning adding to your principal balance under certain conditions. So your loan wouldn't necessarily grow even if your 10% payment didn't cover all the interest accruing each month.
So these changes really cemented IBR's role, didn't they? Our sources called it a symbol of government accountability and student-centered policy.
I think that's fair. It showed a commitment beyond just giving out the loan. It was about supporting borrowers through repayment, acknowledging that circumstances change, and reinforcing that idea that, getting an education shouldn't mean a lifetime of debt servitude.
Okay, so on paper, this sounds great. It addressed a real destructive problem, offered hope, flexibility, a path out of debt. But as you often find with these huge government programs, especially ones involving private companies like loan servicers, the reality on the ground, well, it wasn't always quite so rosy, was it?
No, that's where the promise started to meet, let's say, some friction. The intent was good, definitely. But the execution, that often created new headaches for borrowers.
Like what kind of headaches?
Well, poor servicer communication was a huge one. Borrowers consistently reported just terrible experiences trying to deal with their loan servicers.
Long waits on the phone.
Yeah.
Getting the runaround.
Exactly. Hours on hold, getting different answers from different people, maybe sending in paperwork that just disappears into a black hole.
That's more than just annoying, though. That can have real consequences.
Absolutely. It leads to missed deadlines, maybe incorrect payment calculations because the servicer made a mistake, and just immense stress trying to navigate the system that often felt deliberately confusing.
And then there was the annual recertification.
Right. The annual income recertification errors.
Right.
To stay on an income-driven plan like IBR, you have to submit proof of your income and family size every single year.
What happens if there's a mistake? Or you miss the deadline because maybe the servicer lost your paperwork?
Big problems. You could suddenly get kicked off your plan. Your payments could shoot up to the standard, much higher amount overnight. Or, and this is crucial, all that unpaid interest that had been accumulating could suddenly capitalize.
Meaning it gets added to your principal loan balance.
Precisely. Adding potentially thousands of dollars to what you owe instantly just because of a paperwork error or delay.
Ouch. But maybe the most I don't know, insidious issue, the one that really seems to undermine the whole forgiveness idea, was this problem of ballooning balances.
Ah, yes. This was a major, major flaw, especially in the earlier IBR versions. Even if your income-based payment was affordable, say that 15% or 10%, it often wasn't enough to cover all the interest piling up each month.
So even though you're making payment,
Your total loan balance keeps going up. Sometimes people would pay faithfully for 10, 15 years, only to look at their statement and find they owe more than they originally borrowed.
that's just crushing psychologically.
Devastating. It completely warps the idea of making progress towards being debt-free. It feels like you're running on a treadmill, paying and paying, but the finish line is actually moving further away.
So it's this strange paradox then. IBR was a lifeline. Absolutely. Kept people out of default, gave them breathing room. But there's this other side to it. Did it maybe inadvertently make the bigger problem worse? Like a double-edged sword.
That's a really critical counter-argument, and it gets into the complexity of policy impacts. While IBR helped individuals manage their debt, some argue it also masked deeper problems in the higher education system itself.
How so? You mean with tuition costs?
Exactly. The argument goes like this. If colleges know that students can ultimately manage potentially huge debt loads through programs like IBR, essentially deferring the harshest consequences, does that reduce the pressure on colleges to control their own costs?
Ah, I see. If the student can just sign up for IBR, maybe the sticker price doesn't scare them off as much.
That's the theory. Why should a university aggressively cut costs or slow tuition hikes if they know students have this backstop, this ability to push the financial pain down the road? So in this view, IDR might have indirectly subsidized institutional bloat.
Bloat meaning?
Things like, fancy new dorms, climbing walls, expanding administrative staff, things that drive up costs but don't necessarily translate directly into better educational outcomes. It allowed tuition to keep rising without facing the immediate market backlash you'd expect if students simply couldn't afford the payments right out of the gate.
So it solved one problem, borrower distress, but potentially fueled another, rising college costs.
It's a complex interaction, definitely. You fix a symptom, but maybe you enable the underlying disease to continue in a way.
That's a really important dynamic to understand. But okay, despite these structural critiques, these operational nightmares with servicers, it seems like IBR still had this incredibly powerful psychological hold on borrowers.
Oh, absolutely. You cannot overstate that. Despite the flaws, for millions, it provided genuine mental relief from the fear of lifelong debt.
It made it feel manageable.
Yes, it transformed this abstract, terrifying burden into something concrete, something you could plan around. It offered crucial flexibility during economic downturns. If you lost your job or took a pay cut, your payments could adjust downwards. That was huge during recessions.
And it allowed people to choose careers they cared about.
Critically, yes. It gave people the ability to pursue meaningful work without financial ruin. Think about teachers, nurses, public defenders, researchers. People went into these fields, took on the necessary debt for the degrees, because IBR existed. It made those choices possible. It wasn't just a loan program, it was an enabler of life paths.
It felt like a deal, a contract.
Exactly. It was understood implicitly and explicitly as a contract. The government essentially said, you hold up your ente, pay what you can reasonably afford based on your income for this set period, and we'll hold up ours by forgiving the rest.
People plan their lives around that.
They did. Decisions about careers, about buying a home, about starting a family, about retirement savings, all were made with this IBR promise as a foundational assumption. It was baked into their financial DNA.
And then, then comes the twist. As our sources put it, just chillingly simple. That contract has now been broken.
Yeah, that's where everything changed.
And this break, this moment of rupture, it didn't happen with some big dramatic announcement, did it? It was much quieter. In 2025, the U.S. Department of Education just quietly paused student loan forgiveness under the IVR plan.
Exactly. No big press conference, no front page headlines beforehand, no public debate. It was, as the sources describe, sort of buried in bureaucratic language.
What kind of language?
Things like, the forgiveness process is under review or subject to policy realignment or needing a systems audit. Very neutral sounding administrative terms.
Which raises a huge question. Was that intentional? Was it a strategy to kind of sneak this through, avoid that immediate firestorm of criticism, or was it genuinely just bureaucratic bumbling?
It's hard to know the intent for sure, but the effect was the same either way. Borrowers who had hit their 20 or 25-year mark, who were expecting forgiveness, were suddenly told, often in confusing notices or just by seeing their loans not disappear, that it wasn't happening. Or at least not yet. Indefinitely delayed.
Creating this massive uncertainty.
Profound uncertainty and precarity. It shook the ground under their feet. For many, it felt less like a routine policy check and more like a deliberate attempt to hide a broken promise.
And let's be clear about who got caught in this net. Our sources are very specific. This wasn't impacting new borrowers, right?
No, not primarily. The immediate impact was on those who had done the time, people who had paid for 20 to 25 years. A literal generation of payments.
People who, as the source says, never missed a payment.
Right. They did everything they were supposed to do, fulfilled their end of that contract meticulously, and crucially, these were people who had budgeted their lives around the expectation of relief.
I keep coming back to that marathon analogy. You run for 2 decades, you see the finish line, you've planned everything for what happens after you cross it, maybe retiring, maybe finally buying a house, maybe just breathing freely for the first time.
And then the officials just wave you on, sorry, keep running, we're reviewing the finish line.
It's brutal. The emotional impact, the financial impact, it's hard to overstate for those individuals.
And the immediate consequences were just devastating. People were left in limbo. Think about it. How can you make major financial decisions? Can you afford to retire? Can you sell your house? Can you pay for that medical procedure you've been putting off? All those plans suddenly frozen.
Because the debt you thought would be gone isn't.
Exactly. And maybe even worse than the financial chaos was the erosion of trust. Trust in the federal loan system eroded, as our sources put it.
If they can break this promise.
What other promises are breakable? It fundamentally undermines people's faith in government commitments. Even if the official reason was a systems audit, the way it happened, the lack of clear, proactive communication did immense damage. It damaged that foundational trust you need between citizens and the government, especially when it involves agreements that shape people's entire lives. It became a crisis of confidence.
Well, unsurprisingly, the reaction wasn't quiet. Our sources describe the public response as swift, emotional, and explosive. And you saw it everywhere, right? Social media just lit up.
Oh, yeah. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit. They became these instant hubs for outrage, for sharing stories, for solidarity.
And the stories themselves, our sources call them gut-wrenching. These weren't abstract complaints about policy. These were deeply personal accounts from people who had paid for decades, played by the rules, expected freedom, and got delay. Indefinite delay.
And when you read through those stories, these really powerful common themes emerged. Over and over again, you heard about profound feelings of betrayal.
Betrayal by the system they trusted.
Exactly. There was this deep, visceral rage at the lack of communication from the Department of Education. People felt ignored, dismissed, and then just pervasive anxiety over how this affects their retirement, housing, and health.
Imagine planning your retirement around that forgiveness date.
Or finally thinking you could afford a down payment or get that knee surgery, and suddenly it's all thrown into doubt. It led people to question the whole system, the value of a system that demanded so much and gave so little in return. It felt to many like they were being punished for doing everything right.
We saw posts, didn't we, from people who'd put off having kids or buying a home or even getting needed medical care because they were so focused on making those loan payments, trusting the promise at the end.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a financial burden. It dictated life choices. And having that final relief pulled away felt like a complete invalidation of all those sacrifices.
And that anger, it didn't just stay online as individual venting. It organized. The hashtag honor the promise started trending everywhere. That felt like a real rallying cry.
It was. It signaled a collective demand for accountability. This wasn't just scattered frustration, it was becoming a movement.
And it moved beyond hashtags pretty quickly, right? People started taking concrete actions.
They did. The backlash organized rapidly. Some organized petitions, gathering hundreds of thousands of signatures, trying to put direct pressure on lawmakers, on the Department of Education, demanding they reverse this pause.
And then came the lawsuits.
Right. Others filed lawsuits, individual borrowers, groups of borrowers, directly challenging the legality of the department, just halting forgiveness like this.
And advocacy groups got involved too.
Big time. Nonprofits like the Student Borrower Protection Center ramped up legal pressure. These groups have the expertise, the resources to really dig in, gather evidence, build strategic cases, and represent borrowers who might not be able to afford lawyers on their own.
So this isn't just noise, it's a coordinated pushback.
Absolutely. It's a multi-front effort, public pressure, legal challenges, all aimed at forcing the government to honor what people understood as a binding promise.
Which brings us right into the thick of it, the legal battlefield. Because with this much anger, this much perceived injustice, the courts were the inevitable next step. And it all boils down to this fundamental, burning legal question. Can they actually do this? Is the Department of Education allowed to change repayment contracts retroactively?
That's the billion-dollar question, legally speaking, and it plunges us deep into administrative law.
How does that work? Can agencies just change rules whenever they want?
Well, federal agencies do have significant power to interpret policies, to update regulations. Things change, new administrations have different priorities, systems need adjusting. That flexibility is necessary.
But there have to be limits, right?
There are, and the key limit here is when those agency actions seem to violate explicit statutory expectations. Meaning, if Congress passed a law creating a program with certain promises, like the law establishing IBR and its forgiveness component, can the agency just decide later to ignore or fundamentally alter that promise without Congress changing the law?
That's where the courts might step in.
Exactly. Courts often intervene when an agency's interpretation or action seems to contradict the clear intent or the actual text of the law passed by Congress. It becomes a fight over where agency discretion ends and where a legally binding promise rooted in statute begins.
It's a balancing act between letting agencies function and protecting citizens who relied on the law.
Precisely. Balancing necessary administrative flexibility with the need for predictability, fairness, and trust in government commitments.
Okay, so let's dig into the specific legal arguments the borrowers and their advocates are making. Our sources point to three main lines of attack.
That's right. First, there's a strong argument based on contract law, essentially asking, did the federal government breach an implicit contract with borrowers?
Even if there wasn't a formal signed paper contract like buying a car.
Yes. The argument is that when borrowers signed up for IBR, agreed to make payments for 20 or 25 years based on the rules presented, and the government consistently promoted forgiveness as the outcome, that created a binding agreement, a meeting of the minds with mutual obligations. Breaking that promise, the argument goes, is a breach of contract.
Okay, what's the second argument?
Due process. This is a constitutional argument, it asks. Were borrowers given fair notice and opportunity to contest the change?
The right to be heard before the government messes with your rights.
Fundamentally, yes. Due process generally requires notice and a chance to respond before the government takes action that significantly impacts your rights or property, and arguably expected loan forgiveness counts. Here, the change felt sudden, arbitrary, with no clear path for borrowers to challenge it before it happened.
And the third argument. This one sounds particularly powerful. Estoppel.
Estoppel is a really interesting legal principle. It basically asks, can the government be held to its word after decades of consistent policy, especially when people have relied on that word to their detriment?
Meaning, if the government consistently said, pay for 25 years and get forgiveness, and people did that, plan their lives around it.
The government might be estopped, prevented from suddenly changing its tune and denying that forgiveness. The idea is that it's fundamentally unfair to pull the rug out from under people who reasonably relied on long-standing government promises and actions. Borrowers made huge life decisions, career paths, financial planning, delaying gratification based entirely on this consistent promise. Estoppel argues the government can't just walk that back now.
So these aren't just technicalities. They're about fairness, accountability, government reliability.
Exactly. They touch on fundamental principles of how government should operate and treat its citizens, especially when long-term commitments are involved.
Now, this whole question of the government's power over student loans, this isn't entirely new territory, is it? We just saw a major Supreme Court case related to this recently.
That's right. The shadow of the 2023 Supreme Court decision hangs over all of this. That case struck down President Biden's plan for broad, one-time student loan forgiveness.
And the reasoning there was crucial, wasn't it? It was about congressional authority.
Precisely. The court ruled that the administration lacked clear congressional authorization to enact such a massive, sweeping forgiveness program on its own. The power of the purse, the power to forgive debt on that scale, the court said, rests with Congress unless Congress explicitly delegates that authority.
So how does that precedent affect this IBR fight? It seems different.
It is different, and that distinction is critical for the current lawsuits. The 2023 case was about the executive branch trying to create a new, broad forgiveness program without specific legislation. The IBR situation is about the executive branch allegedly failing to implement an existing forgiveness program that was created by Congress through statute.
So the argument is the administration isn't creating something new, it's failing to execute the existing law.
That's the core legal argument from the borrower's side. They're saying the authority and the mandate for IBR forgiveness already exist in the law passed by Congress years ago, and the department is improperly failing to follow that law.
Who's actually bringing these lawsuits now?
It's a real coalition. You have individual borrowers, people directly harmed by the pause. You have legal aid clinics stepping up to represent vulnerable borrowers who can't afford lawyers. And significantly, you have state attorneys general getting involved.
Why are states suing the federal government over this?
They argue the pause harms their residents, hurts their state economies, and that they have an interest in ensuring the federal government follows the law and honors commitments made to their citizens.
The outcome here could be huge. Our sources say it could redefine what forgiveness actually means in America.
It really could. It might set a major precedent about how much power an administration has to alter or delay benefits promised under existing laws. It could either strengthen the government's hand to change policies retroactively or, conversely, significantly limit that power, potentially establishing stronger rights for borrowers under these long-term plans.
Okay, so you got the legal battles raging. Unsurprisingly, this is also detonated like a political landmine in Washington. The partisan divide seems immediate and stark.
Oh, absolutely. It fell right along familiar fault lines. Our sources show Democrats, particularly figures like Senators Warren and Sanders, immediately blasted the suspension as morally unacceptable.
Their argument being?
Focused on the broken promise, the impact on working families, the need to address the student debt crisis as an economic drag, and a matter of fairness. It's framed as the government betraying its own commitments.
And on the other side, Republicans.
Their argument, consistent with past positions, is largely that forgiveness itself was always fiscally irresponsible and legally dubious. They focus on the cost to taxpayers, the idea of personal responsibility for debts taken on, and the potential unfairness to those who paid off their loans or didn't borrow. They might even see the pause as a necessary correction.
This puts President Biden in a really tough spot, doesn't it? Especially thinking about upcoming elections.
Yeah.
You said earlier, here's where it gets really interesting.
It's an incredibly precarious position for him, a real political tightrope walk. On one side, if he pushes too hard to restore or accelerate forgiveness, he risks more legal blowback.
Given that 2023 Supreme Court ruling.
Exactly. Any strong executive action could immediately trigger lawsuits from conservative states or groups, potentially leading to another high-profile defeat in court, making the administration look ineffective.
But if he doesn't act decisively, if he seems to let the pause continue,
then he risks alienating crucial voter groups, particularly key young voters before the 2026 midterms. And looking ahead to 2028, millennials and Gen Z are heavily burdened by student debt. This issue resonates deeply with them.
their turnout could be decisive in close races.
Absolutely. If they feel betrayed or ignored on this issue, it could dampen their enthusiasm, depress turnout, or even push some towards third-party candidates. For the Democrats, that's a potentially devastating electoral calculation. It's a classic damned if you do, damned if you don't political dilemma.
So with all this pressure, the public outcry, the legal threats, the political heat, Congress is stepping in, right? Congressional hearings are underway.
Yes, hearings are happening. Lawmakers are definitely feeling the pressure to respond, to investigate, maybe to find some kind of legislative fix, or at least to score political points by blaming the other side.
What kinds of solutions are actually being discussed in Congress?
Well, there's a range of proposals bubbling up, kind of falling into two camps: fixing the current system or more fundamental changes.
Okay, what about the fixing proposals?
Some ideas aim to prevent this kind of thing from happening again, like enshrining forgiveness timelines in federal statute, making it crystal clear in the law passed by Congress exactly when forgiveness happens, removing administrative wiggle room.
So an agency couldn't just pause it.
It would be much harder, legally and politically. Another idea is creating a formal borrower bill of rights. This would legally guarantee things like clear communication standards from servicers, fair dispute resolution processes, stronger protections against error.
What about the servicers themselves? They seem to be part of the problem.
There are proposals targeting them, too. Some talk about breaking up federal servicers and rebuilding a public system. The argument is that the current privatized servicing model is inefficient, lacks accountability, and is maybe even incentivized against borrowers' interests. A public system, they argue, could be more transparent and borrower-focused.
But how likely are any of these big changes? That raises an important question. How much political will truly exists to enact these sweeping changes?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? Getting major legislation through a divided Congress is incredibly difficult, especially with powerful lobbying interests involved. There's a huge gap between identifying problems and actually marshaling the political consensus and capital to pass solutions.
It seems clear, though, this IBR forgiveness issue, it's not going away. It's shaping up to be a major 2026 election issue, especially for younger voters. Politicians ignore it at their peril.
Definitely. It taps into deep anxieties about economic fairness, opportunity, and trust in government issues that resonate powerfully with millennial and Gen Z voters.
Okay, let's pivot now to something really crucial and, frankly, quite painful. The unequal burden of this crisis. Because the IBR suspension, like so many economic shocks, doesn't hit everyone equally. It hits hardest where inequality already thrives.
This is where the issue moves beyond just policy failure and into the realm of social justice. The impact is deeply disproportionate, exacerbating existing racial and gender gaps.
Let's talk about the racial disparities first. Our sources are stark on this.
They are. For example, Black borrowers are twice as likely to owe more than they borrowed after 10 years on their loans. Think about that. Despite paying for a decade, their debt grows.
Why is that?
It's a complex mix of factors. Historical wealth gaps mean less family support, making borrowing more necessary. There's evidence of predatory targeting by some for-profit colleges towards minority students, and persistent wage gaps after graduation make it harder to pay down principal.
And many work in public service.
Disproportionately so. Many Black and Hispanic borrowers work in vital but often underpaid public sector roles with few alternative repayment options. For them, income-driven plans like IBR weren't just helpful, they were essential for survival. Taking that forgiveness promise away leaves them trapped, often penalizing them for choosing careers that serve the public good.
And it's not just race. There are significant gender disparities here, too.
Equally stark. Our sources show women are more likely to take on debt for higher education in the first place.
Why? Is it the fields they tend to go into?
Partly. Women are more concentrated in fields like education, healthcare, social work, vital fields, but ones that often pay less than male-dominated fields requiring similar education levels. Plus, the gender wage gap persists across the board, meaning women generally earn less post-graduation, even in the same jobs.
And career breaks.
That's another factor. Women are statistically more likely to take career breaks for caregiving, raising children, caring for elderly parents. This interrupts earnings and makes consistent high loan payments more difficult over the long haul.
So for women, too, IBR plans were critical.
Absolutely critical for financial stability and achieving economic independence. The suspension of IBR forgiveness, therefore, hits these groups, women, borrowers of color, especially hard. It actively undermines decades of equity efforts aimed at closing these very economic gaps. It's a systemic setback.
So putting it all together, what does this mean? It means the system isn't just broken, it's actively punishing people who started at a disadvantage. People who came from less, tried to get ahead through education, played by the rules.
It feels that way to many. The pause disproportionately punishes those who came from low-income families, people who didn't inherit wealth, individuals who worked in jobs society values but underpays. It's like the system is set up to penalize the very people who most need it to work fairly.
And the fallout isn't just individual hardship. There are bigger economic waves from this, right?
Huge economic ripple effects. If forgiveness doesn't happen for these millions, our sources predict major consequences. Fewer homes are bought. People burdened by unexpected long-term student debt can't save for down payments, can't qualify for mortgages. That drags down the housing market.
Fewer businesses started.
Right. Entrepreneurship often requires taking risks, maybe taking out loans. If you're already drowning in student debt you thought would be forgiven, you're far less likely to take that leap. That stifles innovation and job creation.
And perhaps the saddest part, retirement.
Yeah. More borrowers enter retirement in debt. That shatters the traditional expectation of a secure retirement. It means less spending power among seniors, potentially more reliance on social safety nets. It's a drag on the entire economy, not just individual households.
So for the millions caught in this right now, it must feel like chaos. No clear answers, no clear direction from the government, just guesswork and anxiety.
That's exactly the situation. Pure guesswork. And the loan servicers, the companies actually managing these loans, our sources say they're overwhelmed, inconsistent, and in many cases, silent.
So you call for help, and Nothing.
Or you wait hours on hold, get conflicting answers, get told they just don't know. It's a system buckling under the pressure of a poorly communicated policy shift, combined with a flood of anxious borrowers seeking clarity. It breeds distrust and despair.
Okay, so in this mess, what are the actual options for borrowers right now? Our sources lay out a few paths, but none sound easy or risk-free.
No, there are no perfect answers right now, unfortunately. One option is just to staying in IBR and hoping for retroactive forgiveness.
Keep paying as usual and cross your fingers.
Pretty much. Trusting that eventually this gets sorted out, forgiveness resumes, and they get credit for the payments they've made. The pro is you don't mess with your current payment or forgiveness clock. The huge con is the uncertainty, what if it never gets fixed or takes years?
What else? Switching plans.
That's another option. Switching to the Savey plan. Saving on a valuable education is generally more generous than older IBR plans. Lower payments, often 5% of discretionary income for undergrad debt, and crucially, it stops interest from ballooning your balance.
Sounds good, but what's the catch?
The big catch is that switching plans usually resets forgiveness clocks. So if you've paid for 18 years on IBR, switching to Save might mean you start that 20 or 25-year clock all over again from year zero. That's a non-starter for many close to the finish line.
Okay, what about public service loan forgiveness?
Right. Pursuing public service loan forgiveness, PSLF, if eligible. PSLF is separate, offering forgiveness after just 10 years of payments for people working in qualifying public service jobs, government, certain nonprofits. If you qualify, it's often a faster path, but the eligibility rules are strict, and it only applies to a specific group of borrowers.
And last option, lawyer up.
Essentially, yes. Seeking legal counsel or joining class actions, taking the fight directly to the department through the courts. But that's often expensive, takes a long time, and the outcome is never guaranteed.
Given all this uncertainty and these tough choices, what should borrowers be doing right now to protect themselves? Our sources have some really concrete advice.
Absolutely crucial advice in this environment. Number one, keep detailed records of payments. Every single payment, every statement, every confirmation number, you need proof you held up your end.
Become your own auditor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Second, recertify income on time. Don't miss that annual deadline for your income-driven plan. Set reminders. Missing it can trigger those payment spikes or interest capitalization.
And document everything.
Everything. Save every notice, email, and phone call transcript. If you call your servicer, note the date, time, who you spoke with, what they said. Screenshot web pages showing your account status. Every piece of paper, every digital record could be vital evidence later on.
It sounds exhausting.
It is, but it's necessary self-defense right now. The good news is borrowers aren't totally alone. Nonprofits and state agencies are offering support, resources, counseling, sometimes legal help. People should seek out that assistance.
This whole crisis, this feeling of a broken contract, it really forces us to ask a much bigger, more fundamental question, doesn't it? Beyond the policy details, it's about ethics. Is it ethical to finance education through lifelong debt?
That is the profound question at the heart of this. It pushes us to examine our societal values around education. And when you look internationally, you see just how different the U.S. approaches.
Like where? What do other countries do?
Well, take Germany. Public universities are essentially free, tuition-wise, for everyone, including international students. Education is treated as a public good, an investment in society's future.
Okay, what about somewhere like Australia?
Australia uses income-contingent loans repaid through payroll. So repayments are automatically deducted, rise and fall with your income, and there are lifetime repayment caps. It's designed to be manageable and shares the risk.
And Scandinavia.
Even further, often subsidized education with living stipends. The goal is to allow students to study without accumulating massive debt or needing to work excessive hours. Again, treating education as a societal investment that benefits everyone.
And then there's the U.S. model. How do our sources describe it? It sounds pretty grim.
Yeah, the summary is stark. High tuition, high interest, punitive default laws, little consumer protection. It's a system that places almost all the risk and burden on the individual student.
Unlike other kinds of debt, student loans are incredibly hard to get rid of, even in bankruptcy.
Exactly. That makes them uniquely burdensome. And critics argue, as our sources do, that this is not just a financial issue, but a moral failing. We say education is the path to opportunity, but we finance it in a way that often traps people.
Education is supposed to uplift, but this system, it feels like it traps young people in a cycle of stress and servitude.
Turning what should be empowering into a source of lifelong anxiety. It forces terrible trade-offs between careers, family, and just basic financial health. Are we educating for prosperity or for indebtedness? That's the uncomfortable question.
So looking ahead, where do we go from this breaking point? Does this crisis spark real, meaningful reform? Or does it ignite something more revolutionary? The debate seems split.
It really does feel like a crossroads. On one side, you have calls for targeted reform, ways to fix the current system's most glaring flaws without tearing it all down.
What kind of reforms?
Things like interest rate caps, maybe preventing interest from growing beyond a certain point, or eliminating capitalization so balances don't balloon unfairly, or automatic forgiveness for low-income borrowers, making relief happen without complex hurdles for those most in need.
Yeah.
And streamlined income certification, maybe using IRS data directly to cut down on errors and administrative burdens.
Making the existing system work better, more humanely.
Exactly. Addressing the pain points without fundamentally changing the underlying model of individual debt financing.
But then there's the other camp, the one saying enough tinkering. The whole model is wrong. What are these more radical demands?
These are the calls for truly fundamental change, demands to cancel all student debt, arguing it's an economic anchor and morally compromised. Calls to make public college free, shifting the burden from individuals to public funding, treating it like K-12 education.
Treating education as a right, not a product.
Precisely. To treat education as a public good, not a private investment that individuals have to gamble on. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these ideas fundamentally challenge how America views and funds higher education, arguing the current approach is failing both individuals and society.
And technology is forcing our hand here too, isn't it?
Yeah.
The changing nature of work.
Absolutely. That adds another layer of urgency. With automation threatening jobs and AI evolving so rapidly, the value proposition of certain degrees is becoming less certain. Many skills learned today might be obsolete tomorrow.
So we need a system that helps people adapt.
We desperately need an education and training system that prepares people for a changing world without punishing them for learning. Saddling people with decades of debt for skills that might not be relevant in 10 or 15 years seems increasingly counterproductive, even dangerous. It hinders adaptability when adaptability is becoming the key skill.
So whether we end up reforming the system we have or building something radically new, one thing seems undeniable after digging into this IBR mess. The current status quo is broken. It's not sustainable, and it's causing immense hardship.
I think that's the unavoidable conclusion. This deep dive into IBR forgiveness, it really transcends the specifics of one policy. It forces us, all of us, to confront a fundamental question. Do we as a society truly believe education is a right accessible to all who can benefit? Or is it a privilege, a commodity reserved for those who can afford the gamble of debt? How we answer that question? Well, it's going to shape the financial futures of generations, the health of our economy, and maybe even the meaning of the American dream itself.
So as you, our listener, reflect on this tangled mess, this web of policy, broken trust, financial anxiety, and very real human impact, what stands out to you? What do you think the future of education and student debt should look like in America? Is it time for careful reform, or is something more revolutionary needed?